Alright, hello everyone, welcome. Today we're going to look at the skeletal muscles, the most common type of muscle in the body, what makes it unique, what makes it what it is, how it's composed, and go into some of the details with that. So without further ado, we're going to look at an example of several different types of skeletal muscle. This, of course, is just the superficial ones on top. You can probably name quite a few of these. Biceps, quads, 4 different muscles here. We've got the gluteus maximus and several others. This is the one type of muscle that we most commonly think of when we are thinking of muscles. Skeletal muscle, unique in its own way as to what it does and how it helps us. These are most types of muscle are most responsible for helping us move. And with that movement, they also use up a lot of energy, which means as a byproduct, they're going to give off a certain amount of heat. So let's look at some of the basic characteristics that make them unique from other such muscles, like cardiac muscle, mostly found in the heart, and smooth muscle as well. So one of the things that defines skeletal muscles is that they are striated. They have many nuclei, multinucleated, and for the most part, they are voluntary, controlled. Not as an automatic function, but as something that we more or less have some control over. So let's look at what makes these. Again, you can see these striations here, which help the muscles contract and composed very uniquely so that they give the function that we need them to provide in that movement. So let's look at the most basic portion of skeletal muscle, the skeletal muscle cell. The smallest unit is called a myocyte. It is a cell and it's tube-shaped. And this is the most basic piece of our muscular system, the skeletal muscle in particular, and has that striated appearance as well as being multinucleated. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a small section and move up to more and more complex structures. So we're going to move on from the myocyte. And as we stack these myocytes together, we're going to get a myofibril. Now, the myofibril, there are a bunch of chains of muscle cells attached together. These myofibrils are composed of different proteins, myosin, actin, and trypsin. These myosin and actin form thick and thin layers that allow for the movement of the muscle to allow it to contract. As you can see, there are many nuclei here on this myofibril, so all of these are packed together, but yet they function as one. On the outside of the myofibril, think of this again as a spaghetti noodle that is more or less doing the job of contracting. So this spaghetti noodle is full of a lot of nuclei, and that particular nuclei then is surrounded by a structure called the sarcolemma, which has all of these more or less functions as a very specialized cell membrane for the myofibril. So again, all these muscle fibers, muscle cells connected as one and then surrounded more or less like in a saran wrap so that they function as one. This sarcolemma, as it functions as a membrane, is going to allow nutrients in and allow waste to travel out. This sarcolemma is then further surrounded by the endomysium, and the endomysium is another protective layer surrounding that. It's composed mostly of connective tissue, has some capillaries in there, so there's where our delivery of nutrients and then expelling of waste occurs, as well as nerves, which then are sending and receiving signals that allow these muscles to contract. As we continue to stack this, we're going to go from the endomysium to the fascicle, and that fascicle very basically is a series of these muscle fibers, and then the fascicle binds the muscle fibers, the sarcolemma, and this endomysium all together. So that is the next layer called the fascicle as a review. And then we're going to go to the next layer. Again, just keep wrapping around, adding more strength to the muscle cells themselves working together. The next level is the paramecium. And this paramecium Again, more connective tissue. It's surrounding this group of muscle fibers and fascicles. So continue to build on that. In between that, we now have larger blood vessels that are, again, transporting nutrients and delivering waste back to the kidneys. And surrounding the paramecium. Again, the paramecium would be surrounding a series of fascicles and endomecium and sarcolemma and microfibrils. So we're continuing to build this very strong structure. Continue to wrap noodle after noodle, these rod-shaped pieces, these tubular structures. Then we're going to go to the epimecium. Okay, and the epimecium is continuing on this protection. It's a fibrous tissue. It's surrounding muscles. It's protecting these muscles from other muscles and from the bone, and specifically protecting them from friction. Good old physics coming in there and causing friction, because these things do generate a lot of heat and movement. We want to make sure that they do not cause damage to one another. So this epimecium is another protective layer that allows the muscles to move past one another without generating friction in a great amount and causing damage to the muscles. Further, we're going to then, and the epimecium is continuous with all of these other structures, allowing, again, good protection, but then allowing them to connect to the tendons. And the tendons, of course, are connecting a series of connective tissues. This is getting thicker and thicker. These tendons are then a little bit more immobile, and those tendons are then connecting to the bone. And this allows us to then move our arms, move our hands. This allows me, with this wonderful dexterity, to move the mouse up and down so we can look at this in review. So we start off with the myocytes. Myocytes then combine to become myofibrils. Those myofibrils composed of a series of proteins that allow the muscles to move. Those myofibrils have many nuclei, but they do essentially function as one unit. The nuclei, those myofibrils, protected by a sarcolemma. Those individual muscle fibers then connected through the endomecium, allowing nutrients and stimuli to be received. That's further wrapped by the fascicles. Those fascicles are gathered together, which then come together and are wrapped further by the paramecium, providing more nutrients. And then that is further, again, surrounded by the epimecium, which continues until we get to a tendon, and then eventually we attach to a bone. Basic skeletal structure, the breakdown from the beginning all the way to the macro, so that you're looking at a muscle such as the bicep or the tricep, which essentially is 2 muscles and then 3 muscles with the bicep and tricep respectively. So with this information, scientists have been interested in studying how muscles get stronger, what are some of the conditions that will improve muscle growth and strength. So here's a good example of that muscular fiber growing in size. One of the things that scientists started to look at is, does the amount of oxygen available to the muscles affect the health of muscle and how it can grow? And so it was determined that the greater muscle mass that you have, one of the main contributors to that, especially in males, was how good of an oxygen supply you have. The respiratory system then providing the oxygen, allowing these muscles to grow from this size to every young man's dream, this size. And they found that respiratory muscle strength was one of the main contributors on that. Now, that goes back to the blood supply and so forth. Now, this was not the same case for females. One of the things that they found as far as the health of muscles in females was not due to the respiratory strength, but was actually due to lung capacity. The greater lung capacity within females was then correlated to the amount and health amount of muscle mass as well as the strength of the muscle in females. Very interesting to note that there are two different things that are contributing to the overall muscle mass in both males and females. I would like to see another study and look into another study to see why those correlations are such. But the study that I looked at so far was merely looking at one of the contributors to muscle mass, and in males, as a review, that was more or less the respiratory strength of those muscles, whereas in females, it correlated to lung capacity. So fascinating information on that front. I would love to see some more studies done on that and do a little bit more research as to why those are the factors that contribute to males and females. There is the research that was done. You can look at this at your leisure. The reason I would be interested in this is this does go into some debate on muscle mass. So we have someone who is born a male and then they want to transition to a female. This brings up all sorts of interesting questions in the ongoing debate that people seem to be having, which in a lot of ways tends to ignore some of the science that is showing us that there are very different and distinct ways in which our muscles develop from being male or female. Very fascinating things to look into. I think a lot of research would be helpful in this matter to kind of resolve the issue that most people are having. Anyway, there you go, the basics of muscles, skeletal muscles in particular, and how they're made up, and what composes them, as well as some of the studies into going into the health of certain muscles. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for joining me.